How does your identity impact how you feel about right of return for Palestinians and Aliyah for Jews?
How does my identity affect that?
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the question. Can you elaborate?
Okay, so when I originally wrote it, it's not clear. It's like I could say, how does your identity affect how you feel about right of return? But we ended up writing it for both people. So you could answer on how you feel about Aliyah if you want, or you could just ask, how do you feel about Hakol Auda? How do you feel about the right of? Yeah, how do you feel? What is this principle?
Simple. Anybody who's taken away from his house should have the right to get back. Simple stuff. Is that doesn't need identity. That needs just humanity. So then identity comes into play. So if some Swahili, like African person would say, how do I feel about Palestinians going back to their house? Well, if it's their house, they should go again, have the right to go back.
Sure.
If they disagree with that, then they have a problem with their own human structure. So it's not about identity. Of course, Palestinians feel more, and like Israelis would feel more about Aliyah, we would feel more about the right to return. The difference is, the big difference, and not to tease you, but people who are coming back through Aliyah were not necessarily kicked out by Palestinians now, and they're getting their rights back. Whereas we have a right back, which goes back only to 72 years, and until today, Palestinians are kicked out of their houses. So we still have a right today that we need to get back to, which is not happening, as opposed to the Jews who feel like the 2,000, 3,000 years ago connected, and now they're coming back to with all the rights and privileges and taking over Palestinian houses. So the other one for me is pretty unethical, sorry to say, pretty inhumane in its practice, and it's cruel, and it's against the humans and humanity in many ways. Okay? It's not bad for Jews to be here. That's not my argument. It's bad for them to come here based on other people's lands and taking over. Even if they belong here, they can come here, visit here, buy ethically here, but not claim this is my land because I feel belonging here. If I love Germany, it doesn't mean it's my land, Rafi. It means I would love to live there. I would go and live there, and one day I would become German. Why not? It doesn't mean it's my land, even if it belonged to me in the sense of belonging and kingdoms and governments and those, all facade or systems, let's call them, that we govern with humans just for the sake of continuity. So speaking of that, anybody would love to go in any place of this face of the planet. Since you're religious or you believe in the Bible, God said, this planet Earth is mine, and you humans are my guests. He doesn't say it is yours and this is blah, 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 blah. And he sets the foundation. So we're all guests here, temporary living. We need to co-share, not keep claiming possessiveness. Okay, this is for me. So Palestinians' right to return is not a claim for possessiveness. It's a claim of bringing justice and ending theft. Not because they have to be here physically. It's rather to end the unethical movement that is still going on and justified with the Israeli laws or the unethical laws. I'm sorry I'm getting a bit like here firm about these things. But yes, for us, how do I feel about Aliyah? Pretty unethical. How do I feel about right of return? Pretty unjust what's happened to Palestinians. And they should be allowed even if they don't come back, because that's the real right of return. Whereas the other one is just a gift. It's like Jews have the right to come in. So it's just a privilege. There is no gain from it, even if I avoid the conflict. There's no gain from it for any other people except the Jews themselves. It's selfish. And from another perspective, they're stealing other people's lands to come back and other people's privileges. So that's a big issue.
Okay, so I feel as a Jew, obviously, a little differently about it. That this was my land, I was here. I think the Palestinians may have also been here when I last left. I don't know. No, I'm not objecting, but I believe it is my right to come back, and I support that right. But I need to do so ethically, even though I support it. Like it goes back to my story about the park bench. You're on the bench and you get off, and someone else is sitting there. You have to ask nicely to get back on the bench. Right. You have to find a way to share, and I think, and I agree with the religious opinion that you should come diplomatically and peacefully and make an honor to God in the return to the Holy Land, and not do it at the expense of others. I think that's the most important thing. I think there's a concept we call Anida Keneged Mida. That's like an action for an action. It's like what goes around comes around. I think in some ways on a spiritual level, what God is teaching us by this story, it may be hard to hear from you, is that when the Jews, we were suffering in Europe, and maybe in other places in the Middle East, but particularly we were being massacred and about to be a great genocide, like it also happened to your people as well, that in Armenia. But and they wanted to come back, and I don't assume all the Palestinians were aware of what was happening to the Jews. They saw people coming here and they were afraid of them, but the people who were coming here they didn't see what they were running away from. They were, except for the first wave of Aliyah, and only a few of them ended up staying, that every group that came after was running from another major attack on the people there, and they fled all over the world. And some of them came here, and different groups would go everywhere. They were being expelled, and some of the Palestinian leadership didn't want to let them in. They were afraid that we're going to become a minority if we let too many people in. They're going to take over. And I also blame some of the Zionists that started saying wrong things, and then they were on the other side. The Palestinians were here saying, I don't want to let these refugees come here because they're going to take over my country. And now the situation is reversed. God it's changed turned the tables. And now by the Jewish people, my people, are saying, I don't want to let all of them come in. They're going to take over my country, and I'm going to be oppressed. And so I think in order to reconcile on a spiritual way, maybe not in a personal way, but to understand it, is that we need to see what the other person didn't see when this was started. That we need to see what it's like to be a refugee. And remember, we were refugees. Or we have to remember every day that we were slaves in Egypt, and we were brought here by God's gracious hand, and that we need to feel for them and want to accept them. At the same time, they need to understand what it's like to have been outside and want to come home, and they should remember when they were afraid of us, and that understanding of that principle of consent. And so I think now that you have 6.5 million Jews, let's say, all over Tel Aviv, and you could say, well, these Palestinians, these used to live in this house. And you're going to say, well, are we going to move this Israeli out of his home that he grew up in because his grandfather lived in this house? It becomes similar. Maybe it's not the same as my ancestors lived in Hebron 2,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago or whatever. It's not the same. But there's a similar idea that I didn't personally grow up. I grew up, I was attached to in America. That's where I was born. And this Palestinian maybe has lived in America, or he's lived in Germany, or he lived in Jordan or somewhere else. And that's where he grew up. But he has a memory, he has a story that this is his dream to come back. And we have to honor each other's dreams. I think that's one of the most important things, to be a dream catcher. That's how you reconcile. So I think there's religion and,
please go ahead.
So it's religion, but also psychology and spirituality. It's I try to look at it holistically.